order. Maybe General Buchanan can give them that order. I want you to stand by, General Honore. I want to bring in another guest right now, Congressman Steny Hoyer. He's the Democratic House Minority. Congressman, you made an impassioned plea this morning for the American citizens. More than 3.5 million Americans are in Puerto Rico right now. Give me your reaction to the federal response, at least so far.
Well, I agree absolutely with General Honore, who went into New Orleans and got the job done. We haven't done that. We haven't deployed enough resources at this point in time. As he said, Katrina was a more contained geographical area. This is a much larger one. Very frankly, General Honore, I think it has said it all. We need to deploy every resource necessary. Very frankly, that aircraft carrier that went in to Florida should be diverted down to Puerto Rico now, the air assets, the requisite personnel, and what General Honore said, I hope General Buchanan has all the authority he needs to get this job done. We have people, I talked to Secretary Price this morning, early this morning, about people who are dying because of their inability to get to a dialysis center that works. Frankly, they can't get anywhere. Some of the dialysis centers are up and running in some of the urban areas, but folks can't get to it. We need to have enough personnel on the ground working every day to make sure that we can save lives. There will be time, and we ought to have legislation to give the resources necessary to rehabilitate. But right now, this is about saving lives in the face of one of the biggest humanitarian crises we've had in this country. Yeah, these are Americans, and we ought to respond as vigorously as we respond to any other crisis in the world or here on the mainland.
Yeah, we deployed the Abraham Lincoln, the aircraft carrier, the Abraham Lincoln, to Florida, and it would not be all that difficult to move that aircraft carrier over to Puerto Rico right now.
Frankly, we should have.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, frankly, Wolf, we should have done that days ago. General Honore is correct. I mean, yesterday we started mobilizing. The day before that, or 2 days before that, I had called for appointing an individual similar to General Honore to be in charge of coordination and, very frankly, of getting the job done without having to worry about any red tape or any by your leave kind of comments. We need to save lives. We need to be in there with full resources. The armed forces can get the job done if they're given full authority to do so and the resources to get it done.
And if it requires more than one aircraft carrier, send in 2 or 3 or 4, whatever it takes with the troops to save these people's lives.
That's why I say whatever resources are needed ought to be deployed, frankly, days ago, but now.
Very quickly, when are you going to vote on legislation to fund this massive reconstruction effort in Puerto Rico? I guess this is not going to be cheap, as you know.
Well, it's not going to be cheap, but it needs to be done. These are American citizens, and just as we did in New Orleans, just as we will do in Houston and as we'll do in Florida, we need to make sure that with the states, of course, Texas has resources, Florida has resources, Puerto Rico is stretched, as we know. They've had great fiscal difficulties, so we need to make sure that we build back better. We don't put in second-rate systems that will be subject to devastation by a Category 4 or Category 5 hurricane. We've got to expect that's going to happen again, and we need to prepare for that kind of devastation.
Well, when are you going to vote for the funding?
Well, I think we'll hopefully vote for the funding before we leave here in the next 2 weeks. Clearly, one of the things that has to be done is an inventory and assessment of what spending is needed. But we need to do this, I think, before, I would hope and urge that we do it before we leave here. We have another 2 weeks, and then we have a week break for a district work period again. Frankly, before we leave, we ought to have a bill that appropriates sufficient funds. It won't be all the funds necessary. That'll be done over time. But whatever is needed in the short term, we ought to provide authority for before we leave here in 2 weeks.
All right, Congressman Steny Hoyer, thanks very much for joining us. The people in Puerto Rico are counting on all of us to help during this desperate situation.